Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to today's public hearing. I'm Frank Clark, and on behalf of my fellow board members, thank you for coming. The purpose of this hearing is to receive public comments on the proposed Illinois State Board of Education modification application request. The board is scheduled to vote on this at our regular board meeting today. Madam Secretary, please state for the record the notice procedure for this hearing.
Thank you, Mr. President. Notice of this public hearing was posted on the cps.edu and cpsboe.org websites on August 7, 2018. Notifications regarding this hearing were also sent to union representatives and state legislators representing Chicago on August 8, 2018. The public notice was published in the Chicago Sun-Times on August 14, 2018. And, Mr. President, I would also like to note for the record the members present here today. Member Furlong?
Present.
Vice President Guzman?
Present.
Member Dr. Hines?
Present.
Member Ward?
Present.
And President Clark?
Present.
5 members present. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We now will proceed with the first presentation, and that will be Chief McDade.
Good morning, board members, President Clark. We are requesting a modification and submitted an application to the Illinois State Board of Education for the Accelerated Placement Act. Some background information on the act. Our governor of Illinois signed the Accelerated Placement Act on August 25, 2017. The Illinois State Board of Education is still in the process of developing the administrative rules for implementing this act, and the Accelerated Placement Act took effect July of 2018. The CEO is requesting a modification to the school code provision to provide the district the additional time needed to develop a comprehensive plan that incorporates all of the provisions of the act. Based on the current act, the CPS is requesting modifications as follows. In the area of the act, the section 14A that suggests that each district have a policy in place for the 2018 school year, we're requesting that our policy be effective for the 2019-2020 school year that allows for accelerated placement to include and incorporate the reference of the following components. So all policies should have a provision that allows for students that have not been identified as gifted and talented, but the opportunity that they have high ability, that they also would benefit from the Accelerated Placement Act. A fair and equitable decision-making process, meaning that we have to involve multiple persons and stakeholders in development of this policy, which is inclusive of students and parents and guardians. And then that we also have to have procedures for notifying parents and guardians of a child's decision affecting the child's participation in the accelerated program. And then finally, we also must have an assessment process that includes multiple valid and reliable indicators. In Chicago Public Schools, we currently have practices that address many of the provisions within the Act. For families who would like to participate in an application process, the district does provide an annual process for students to be identified for accelerated programs, which include our entire school gifted centers. So we have currently 3 regional gifted centers, which include Keller Regional Gifted Center, Addison Regional, and Leonard Regional. We also have gifted programs within the neighborhood magnet and magnet cluster schools, which offer full-time grouping of acceleration in regional gifted centers, English and EL. Students can benefit from 1 full year in the primary grades or 2 full years of acceleration in grades 4 through 8. We also have acceleration in our academic centers, which provides up to 2 full years of acceleration with a total of a 6-year trajectory of accelerated learning. In our regional gifted centers in English, we have Beasley, Beaubien, Bell, Carnegie, Coonley, NTA, Pritzker, and South Loop. We also have regional gifted centers for EL in Greeley, Orozco, and Pulaski. Our academic centers include Brooks, Kenwood, Lane, Lindblom, Morgan Park, Taft, and Whitney Young. And for those students who take advantage of the academic centers in the high schools, they also earn credit towards high school graduation. In our classical program, which also offers the entire student population acceleration, and some are within neighborhood magnet and magnet cluster schools. Those students have full-time grouping and acceleration at least 1 year across the school continuum for grades K through 6 and K through 8. And for those schools, we have the entire population of classical, which includes Decatur, which is a K through 6 model, McDade, Poe, and Skinner. McDade and Poe are both K through 6, while Skinner North is K-8. We also have the classical program within a neighborhood and magnet cluster school, which is Skinner West. In addition, this year, the board approved 2 new classical programs at both Bronzeville and Sorwana, which is adding additional opportunities for students who are interested in applying for an accelerated program. So at this time, we're requesting a modification with the following next steps. 1, we want additional time to ensure that we have a comprehensive policy that takes into consideration the administrative rules that ISBE will set forth, which they are in the process of developing. This policy also requires that we have public engagement, community engagement for parents and community throughout the city. So we'll need additional time to make sure that every community has an opportunity to weigh in and have input on that. We also want to make sure that we are aligning. We already have really comprehensive opportunities in programming for gifted and accelerated, and we want to make sure that in the policy it requires an additional assessment. And so we need time to align and make sure the assessments that we do provide to meet the provisions of this act, that they're in alignment with the assessments that we already have in place for our gifted and classical and accelerated programs. Additionally, we need time for training, to train personnel on the policy, to vet an assessment tool and make sure that not only that there's alignment, but that the tool meets all of the qualifications, because this would take into consideration not just grade level, but also subject area. So we're talking about a very comprehensive assessment system. So in order to do this effectively and implement it with integrity, we want to make sure that we take the adequate time and planning to do this the right way.
Does that conclude your presentation?
That concludes.
Board members, questions?
So, yeah, just one clarification. So this is requiring us to have a policy, and we're asking time to develop the policy, but we already have practices in place. So if there are parents out there that are looking for an option or whatever, we have practices in place, but we're taking the time to make sure that those practices roll up into a policy that then will come back to the board.
Correct. So for parents that are seeking this kind of accelerated program, we do have practices already in place throughout the district that thousands of students can take advantage of. It's a yearly process for many of the schools that I named. But in addition to that, we have to have a policy for those students who demonstrate high ability that are not able to access our programming. And so we want to make sure that we follow through with all of the provisions of the Act, but most importantly, that we have the level of family and community engagement that is necessary to do this properly.
Great. Thanks.
Chief, have we notified? Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, thank you. What kinds of questions or concerns have been brought already?
Some of the questions around the actual Act itself. For us, some of the questions that have come up regarding the Act is around, for those students who may demonstrate high ability, but the consideration for the social, emotional, and developmental stages of students. So we want to consider that. Even when we build in the assessment tool, we want to take into consideration those elements, which is really complex, and we want to make sure all of that is accounted for. Those were one of the things. And then the other concern around the modification would be that, students that want to take advantage of this now, and what we're saying is that many of the requirements, we have in place a system for students to take advantage of an accelerated program.
Okay, thank you.
We've notified the state.
I'm sorry?
We notified the
We
state.
have submitted an application to the state.
Yeah, and we're not getting any pushback.
We have not so far gotten any pushback.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's now proceed with today's public comment segment. Madam Secretary, please share the rules for public comment.
Thank you, Mr. President. For the record, I would like to note that registration for the public hearing was held between the hours of 8:30 a.m. and 9 a.m. this morning. Individuals who registered to speak will have 2 minutes to comment, and I will call the speakers in order of registration.
Were you going to make a comment?
Yes, sir. Just wanted to clarify, we will be submitting an application to the state pending the outcome.
The decision that we make today.
Yes.
But we've had communications with them, is really what I
Yes,
was
we have.
asking. Thank you.
Thank you. I will strike that and begin. Thank you, Mr. President. For the record, I would like to note that registration for the public hearing was held between the hours of 8:30 a.m. and 9 a.m. this morning. Individuals who registered to speak will have 2 minutes to comment, and I will call the speakers in the order of registration. Written comments regarding the ISBE modification application may be submitted to the board office by 5 p.m. today. This hearing will conclude after the last person who has signed in to speak has spoken, or at 10 a.m., whichever occurs first. When called, please state your name, and I will proceed by calling the first speaker. We have speaker number 1, please, Angel Alvarez. We will then have speaker number 2, Erik Calvert, and speaker number 3, Irene Gottlieb. Mr. Alvarez?
Thank you, CPS Board. My name is Angel Alvarez. I am the proud parent of a twice exceptional child. I want to fiercely challenge any attempt to not implement the Accelerated Placement Act that went into effect July 1st. This law is needed to provide opportunities for talented students to receive an appropriate education in our public schools, and implementation should not be delayed. There would be an uproar if CPS were to eliminate all varsity sports. It would be unfathomable to suggest that athletically talented students not be allowed to develop and share their skills with the world. However, when it comes to the right to educate our academically gifted students, we make the erroneous assumption that because they are smart, they will be fine. Doing nothing is not the same as doing no harm. The research over the past half-century is definitive. Not placing children in educationally appropriate environments commensurate with their abilities causes them to regress and places them at risk of developing social and emotional problems. It is clear that it is not in the best interest of the child. Implementation of this law is also in the best interest of society as a whole. Without opportunities for advancement and transparency afforded under the law, underperforming schools will have a perverse incentive to deny advancement of gifted students to increase their test scores at the expense of educating the most talented students. This is of particular concern for students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, and students of color. My daughter is being denied appropriate accommodations for her vision and giftedness. Despite graduating at the top of her class and being advanced in kindergarten, she is told she has to repeat kindergarten. Whole grade acceleration cost no more money to the state. Requests have been ignored without regard to the law. The pernicious effects of how CPS implements and adheres to policies means that gifted students will continue to be underserved and underreported. Parents with the financial means to provide education for their children are moved to other districts, exacerbating economic schisms between neighborhoods.
Mr. Alvarez, thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Please comply with the law. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker, please, speaker number 2.
Before the next speaker, Chief, are you aware of he mentioned his specific daughter. Is that an issue that we are aware of?
No, I'm not aware of his individual situation.
Last month, Dr. Jackson received a letter from me that was not replied to yet. Thank you.
So I will get a hold of that letter and, and reply. As a matter of fact, I have Veronica here. Veronica, can you get the parents' information so that we can follow up?
Just to clarify, was that emailed or mailed? 'Cause
No,
I've
that was
never
mailed
received-
certified on July 17th.
No, I've never received that letter, but I will look for it.
I had delivery confirmation, but thank you so much, Dr.
Okay.
Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our next speaker then, please, speaker number 2, Erik Calvert.
Good morning, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. My name is Erik Calvert. I'm an educational researcher at Northwestern University and also co-chair of the Policy and Advocacy Committee of the Illinois Association for Gifted Children and a proud citizen of the city of Chicago. I'm speaking today to ask you to move forward with implementing an acceleration policy today. Acceleration is a low-cost intervention with more than 100 years of research supporting its benefits, both academically as well as socially and emotionally. There are research-based tools that are available now that the district can choose to implement. I would also like to point out that the law was passed more than almost a full year ago today, so there's already been a full year for the district to prepare to implement. And I'd also like to point out that the Illinois Association for Gifted Children has published a model policy that's ready for school districts to adopt today that is based on a research-based policy that's been applied in diverse urban districts in the state of Ohio successfully for more than a decade. Therefore, we would like you to I would like to ask you to not delay implementation or pursuing modification to the statute, but rather move forward by adopting the model policy today. The state has given districts guidance that after adopting a policy, they may review and evaluate and make amendments over time. But the fact is the district is now out of compliance with the law. The Illinois State Board of Education issued guidance in a memo to superintendents in June, confirming that the expectation was that the law would take effect this July. So I ask you to act now rather than to delay or pursue this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Calvert.
Thank you very much. I think we have one more speaker. Chief McDade, again, I know that if we could, we would implement the acceleration policy immediately. I believe you gave an adequate and thorough explanation that we're not capable of doing it today. Can't take issue with your observation that the law was passed a year ago. The fact is, there's not another district. I mean, this is not an excuse. It's just a statement. There's not another district in the state that has the scale that we have in CPS. And I thought that the explanation that the chief gave, listing that we do, in fact, are able to actually address much, not obviously not all, much of what's already in the modification policy. But I don't want you to think that we're ignoring what you said, because I think your comments are valid.
Thank you, Mr. President. And our last speaker will be speaker number 3, please, Irene Gottlieb.
Point of information before my time starts.
No, your time
Excuse me.
starts right now.
Thank you.
Please.
I am the parent of 2 children that are school age. My first child was admitted to Skinner North Classical School, which is the top classical school in Chicago, with near perfect scores into kindergarten last year. We chose not to take the seat because she would have had to do kindergarten over again. She finished first grade in private this year, one day after her 6th birthday. CPS would not have supported her. I agree that CPS supports the vast majority of gifted students and does it well. However, for profoundly gifted students, there is no support. There is no acceleration for more than 1 to 2 years ahead. My other child scored 282 on the MAP test, on the NWM MAP test, which is the standardized test that CPS uses as an example of her achievement. That is 8 to 11 points higher than the average 8th grade graduating student of any selective enrollment program in the city of Chicago. That includes Edison Academic Center, it includes Whitney Young Academic Center, it includes Lane Tech. She's 10 points higher, which represents several grade levels. Her IXL, which is the equivalent of pre-SAT, but for the ACT, puts her in the 97th percentile for English and 95th percentile for reading. She's not being accommodated. She was in the Regional Gifted Center last year. By the way, she was only 8 years old when she achieved those numbers. The 1.5 years or 2 years of acceleration is not enough. She received fewer than 5 hours of academic instruction on all subjects combined last year in CPS, despite advocacy and despite me trying to escalate this as much as I could.
Ms. Gottlieb, thank you for your comments.
Chief Bidet, again, is this a particular, I don't expect you to know what's happening with every child that would qualify a gifted program, but are you aware of the issues that are raised that were just raised?
No, I'm not aware of those issues, but honestly, what the parent is presenting is the exact reason why we have to take the time to address this very complex act, because the parent indicated that she was in a gifted center and that she still found that she needed additional acceleration. And so that essentially is speaking to the fact that the complexity of this has to be accounted for, which means that even the assessments that we have in the gifted, she's basically suggesting didn't capture how advanced her student is. So, that's another reason why we want to make sure that we investigate all of these avenues and that the policy that we put forward gives respect to all of the different students that we have.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments, board members? Okay, well, this concludes the ISBE modification application request hearing, and we will convene our regular board meeting at 10:30. Thank you.